How's it going? Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones, to a very exciting video today because we are going to be discussing another Souls-like, that's right. And this just in, we have some breaking news.
Breaking news, I'm Chinese, more at 6.
So today we are going to be having a look at Wuchang Fallen Feathers, which is another interesting Souls-like to come.
Why do you come here?
So today, my wise ones, we are going to be taking a look at Wuchang Fallen Feathers, and it does seem to be doing some unique things. And if you know anything about me, okay, I am a sucker for anything Souls related. I'm not a huge fan of Souls likes per se, it depends on the game. Some of them have been absolutely brilliant, like Neo, and we're actually getting a new game from that series. Also, Lies of P, I think, is pretty fantastic. Elden Ring is pretty good. So I'm not I'm not against Souls-likes, but they have to actually do something unique. And to be honest, it's super saturated. One of my favorite YouTube channels that I take heavy inspiration from is Iron Pineapple, and his whole content is just looking at different Souls-likes. That just shows you how saturated it truly is in the gaming industry right now, because you can make a whole channel just looking at this one genre of game because there are just tons of them. They are flooding the market, and to be honest, I'm kind of burnt out on them, and I think a lot of people are. There doesn't seem to be much interest in this game, but it does seem to actually care. It is trying to do something unique and interesting. So that's why I wanted to talk about Wuchang Fallen Feathers today and give you a Wuchang Fallen Feathers review. And do forgive me if I'm butchering the pronunciation.
Oh no! It's some Chinese herbs!
Now, one thing I've come to appreciate about Wuchang Fallen Feathers is it's not trying to be purely Souls-like, okay? It is trying to do something a little bit different with its gameplay. I would, say this is much more similar to that of Black Myth Wukong and other games like the first Berserker, okay, which is another great kind of Souls-like game that came out recently, but those games lean more into the character action genre much more than the traditional Souls-like combat, and this has kind of a mixture of both genres where, yes, of course, it's very heavily Souls-like inspired with the lock-on, the, like difficulty and all that kind of stuff, but the actual character to action moment, it's much more, bombastic, it's much more character action driven compared to traditional Souls-like, where it's much more tactical, one-to-one. What I mean is it's much more bombastic, and there's actual verticality to some of your moves. It's a lot more about chaining combos together and all that kind of stuff, and your different abilities and stuff like that, instead of just dodging and watching for an opening. And another thing that I do like about this, that I just have to get off straight away off the bat, is it's not trying to do a parry based Sekiro copy and paste like so many other Souls-like games. It's actually this time focusing much more on dodging, and I just prefer that playstyle. I feel like so many games recently are trying to be parry based, which is a little bit annoying. This one is much more aggressive and much more focused on timing and dodging, and like I said, the chaining of your different moves and abilities and stuff like that. So that's a big win for me. Now, before we get into the Wuchang Fallen Feather review, I just want to highlight something truly special, something that I actually deeply admire and respect, and I want to thank the developers for sponsoring the video so I could showcase this game to my audience, and I truly hope some of you go and check it out, because the fact that they've stuck with this, and it's a small indie game, it's very impressive what they've managed to achieve. And honestly, going back to kind of old school gaming like this, it reminds me of why I kind of love games to begin with. And from the artwork to the gameplay, I think this is something you'll be interested in, so check out Flint. Let's have a quick look. So I highly recommend to you, my wise ones, to check out Flint if you want to support an independent developer who has created all of this from the ground up, and it's finally been finished. He's been working on this game for a long time. If you're a fan of, action adventure top-down games with emphasis on bosses, figuring out puzzles, deep lore, all in this kind of retro aesthetic with some really cool ambience and tone to it. I really highly recommend you check out Flint. You're supporting the channel by doing so and supporting a unique creative individual who has put a lot of hard work into this game, so show him some love and check out Flint. I will be doing a full review of this game very shortly. Also, if you are interested in Flint, it is going for around about 500 yen, which in USD is, very, very small amount of money, so I highly recommend that you give it a chance. So welcome back, my wonderful wise ones, to a great video. Anyway, you might have noticed that I'm wearing a giant, alien probe on my head, and that is a little bit annoying, I do agree with you, but my PC just won't accept my high quality mic for some reason. I've tried everything, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but I finally found a solution. I got a good headset that is a much better mic compared to just using my built-in microphone, so it should sound a lot better now compared to recent videos. Let me know what you think, but I think I've fixed it finally and it sounds of high quality. But if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, giving the video a like. It would mean a great deal to me as I put everything that I am into this channel. I'm passionate about this community, what we're doing here. If you love deeper analysis on video games, video essays, early game reviews, and just deeper game reviews, and philosophical content, I blend them all together on this channel to give you something unique and to create a community of, intellectual gamers, which is quite a rare thing today. So of course I'm going to go into the positives and negatives of this Wuchang Fallen Feathers review, but I'm also going to tell you, like always, if I have a biased opinion or if it's more of an objective take. First things first is, luckily this game is coming out on Xbox Game Pass, so if you are subscribed to anything that is now on Xbox, yes, that's right, your unborn baby is now on Xbox. You can be an Xbox if you want, so you will have a chance to play this game probably at some point for a very small amount of money if it does interest you. Recently, a lot of modern day games, especially this type of genre, bait you with a very attractive female protagonist with a lot of jiggly mechanics on them. And luckily, I feel like this protagonist here isn't too much of, that kind of bait, and it actually focuses more on the gameplay, which is actually very important, unlike some other games. So the first positive, like I already touched on, is basically it is much more of character action focused game compared to traditional Souls-like, and I think that does need praise, because otherwise this genre already, it's quite stale. That just makes it more stale, for everything is simply a copy and paste of Souls mechanics. This one is a little bit more interesting because it allows for quicker movement, and greater diversity with your attacks and your equipment and your playstyle, which I think is good. Also, it has perfect dodging, okay? And like I said, most games today, Souls-likes today, kind of focus around the parry mechanic. This one focuses more around the dodging mechanic. It has an extensive skill tree, like very, very big. And also it's kind of doing the berserker route where you can't just pick up any weapon. You're focused on, particular weapon types, and then you can, basically upgrade what kind of playstyle fits you best, which I think is quite nice because it just means they can really focus on making all of these moves different and unique. And, then at the end, just like with Berserker, you can kind of combo them together, and that's when it truly feels amazing. And I've only, previewed some of the early access stuff, so do bear that in mind. This is an early Wuchang Fallen Feathers review based on the preview access and all that stuff. Another positive that I want to highlight this time around is they are heavily inspired from Dark Souls 1, and that is very nice, refreshing to hear. Since Elden Ring came out, it seems like a lot of developers just want to glaze and spill some hot cream all over Elden Ring because it's the best thing ever, which I disagree. Dark Souls 1 is still the king, in my opinion. They have taken massive inspiration from Dark Souls 1, which is nice to see. They've actually stated as well that it's going to focus much more on an interconnected map space. So it's going to have a main hub, and there are different worlds that you load into, kind of like Dark Souls 2 style, but there is interconnection between these levels, going back to the hub, and I have seen some of that myself. I can't speak on it too much because I haven't seen enough of it to comment on, how wide it is on each level, but there is a lot of looping back and forth, kind of like Lies of P did, but better in my opinion. The next positive also highlights that Dark Souls 1 inspiration, where it's going to be more story driven this time around. Basically, it's doing the same trope that most of these games follow after Dark Souls, where there is a disease spreading across a kind of decaying kingdom. This time it's called the Feathering, I believe. This time it's called the Feathering or something of that nature, and basically what it does is it turns you into a kind of mutant bird person. Yes, that's right, we've reached that level of peak quality writing. But this time around, there is a focus on, like interacting with NPCs, choosing, what you do with that NPC, and that actually changes the outcome of different endings. Very much Dark Souls 1 inspired, where it had, a few different ending types, depending if you, go the route of the dark or, relight the bonfire and stuff like that, and every NPC you can actually interact with. So I do like that. It does seem that they are heavily inspired from Dark Souls 1, which is nice when it comes to the storytelling. And across this game you're going to be playing with 5 different weapon types, so like I said, it's kind of akin to some recent games like Berserker, where it's not about, constant loot drops, which some Souls games go a little bit too crazy with, I've got to be honest. Some people like that kind of more loot nature, but this one isn't like that. It's all about, getting good at a particular weapon type and, playing with different, actual playstyles and stuff like that. Having lots of weapon types is of course fun, but it usually means it's kind of more shallow in nature. And having, custom weapons, having it limited to 5 weapons at this point, makes it a lot more fun, because then there's a lot more like skill ceiling to reach later on, and better combinations, more cool abilities to unlock and stuff like that. So I think that was a smart choice. Now, one big positive that Wuchang Fallen Feathers does super well, I think, is how it interacts with the kind of disease aspect of a Souls-like game. I'm not saying every game does this, like going hollow and stuff. It has deep philosophical meaning in Dark Souls. That's why it's such a groundbreaking game, and ever since then a lot of Souls-like just try and copy and emulate it without understanding the true thematic depth of what Dark Souls actually is. But that's a video for another day. Check out my modded Dark Souls 2 video if you want to know more about my kind of my opinions around the kind of thematic depth of that series, because I talk about it a little bit in that video. But they are trying to do something unique, bridging, lore with gameplay, and that's what makes a good Souls-like in my opinion, because this time you are basically infected yourself, okay? And the more madness that you get, the more, like hollow you become, as it were, then you actually have to fight a mini-boss. Will like kind of manifest and chase you, kind of like the Pursuer in Dark Souls 2 almost, and you actually have to fight a mini-boss to kind of restore some of your sanity and stuff like that. So they are playing with some of the thematic stuff, mixing it with the gameplay, and to me that's what is most interesting about these games. And most games, of Souls-like nature kind of miss that opportunity. Only a few of them have done it well, like Lies of P and the original Dark Souls, so it is trying to do a little bit of that, which I have to commend a lot. Basically, there's a higher chance of this happening if you die often, so basically it incentivizes you to play well and, to be, on that high level of, like focusing on the gameplay and all that kind of stuff, getting good, in other words. And that's what this series should be about, if you ask me. And speaking of difficulty, I wouldn't say that this game is too challenging. It has a nice balance. They aren't too spammy, the bosses and stuff like that. There is a lot of multi-stage bosses in this game, and I know a lot of people are kind of tired of this, and I myself am kind of tired of it. I liked when you just defeated a boss, and then sometimes it surprises you, but when more bosses in general have like 2 stages or 3 stages to them, it gets a little bit tiresome, and it can lead to like boss fatigue. And I have seen that a lot of the bosses do have multi-stages, which I'm not a big fan of, but that's something to be aware of. So that's a slight negative depending on your playstyle, I guess. So now for this Wuchang Fallen Feathers review, let's discuss some of the negatives, okay? So the first one that I want to highlight is this is made on the Unreal Engine, okay? And I absolutely hate the Unreal Engine with a passion. In fact, I might make a whole dedicated video to it at some point, because so many games today are using Unreal. And this engine, it doesn't matter how well you use it, how well you utilize it. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes, you know, it's acceptable, but it's never great. Honestly, I think the visuals in Unreal just don't look amazing. They look kind of washed out to me. And it always has problems. It always has micro stutters, it always has some optimization issues, and that is the problem with this game right now. From the early stuff that I've seen, it's not optimized that well. Hopefully it does get a patch, but you need to be aware of that, you know, there are stutters, FPS dips and stuff like that. The next thing is, basically, I just feel like it needs more of an identity. It, you know, has some very cool enemy designs. I really like some of the enemy designs here because it's tapping into some of that Chinese mythology and stuff, which I think is still, you know, underutilized in Souls-likes. You know, they are starting to do it more now ever since Black Myth, Wukong and stuff like that, but still, it is cool, but it still needs more identity. It needs to stop, you know, leaning exactly on the same, you know, model as Souls. It needs to carve out its own identity, and I feel like that with any Souls-like game today. Another negative I would say is sometimes it does feel a little bit janky, it does feel a little bit stiff to play, similar to like Lies of P or something like that, and I still love that game, but it's just not as fluid as, you know, some games out there with its animation work and stuff like that, and, you know, like lip syncing and all that kind of stuff, but that shouldn't bother you if you're a fan of Souls anyway. But I just think it just needs a little bit more, you know, like originality to it. It's still fun, the world is interesting, and the combat is good, but I feel like I've played this game before, you know, and that is kind of the problem right now with the genre, I feel. And just to, you know, end this video on a positive note, the music is absolutely fantastic in this game. I think they did a great job. It's very dramatic, and you know, it uses a lot of heavy drums. So overall, Wuchang Fallen Feathers, do I recommend this game? I think most of it is purely positives, like I said. There's only a few negatives, and some of them are, you know, biased opinions, like, you know, just having it feel a little bit unoriginal. Some people might, you know, play this game and think it's, you know, truly amazing and original. It depends how many of these types of games you've played before and how much of a die-hard fan you are of the source material that all of these games are kind of trying to emulate. So, you know, this might be enough for you, but I just feel like after Black Myth Wukong, I've kind of already played similar games like this, but I still do think it is a very good and polished game for the most part, and sadly, again, it's not getting much attention, just like most games today. For some reason, it seems just many people aren't interested in new games, but there you go, that is Wuchang Fallen Feathers review. I do hope you enjoyed this one, and you subscribe if you're new to the channel, and giving the video a like or dropping some support to help me continue making videos on this channel by a small donation or whatever you can do. I would appreciate it a lot. But thank you so much for watching, my wise ones, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Have a great day. Peace out.